The whistle pierced the frozen November air like a knife through silk, and Hartley Nash pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, watching the snowflakes thicken into a wall of white that threatened to swallow the world whole. She had made it just in time. Behind her, the conductor was already shouting that this would be the last train through the pass for weeks, maybe months. And as the locomotive hissed to a stop at the small wooden platform of Lyndon, Kansas, she wondered if fleeing Boston had been the wisest decision or the most foolish thing she had ever done. The platform was nearly deserted when she stepped down, her traveling bag heavy in her hands, her boots sinking into the fresh powder that had already accumulated. Most passengers had disembarked at earlier stops, and the few remaining souls hurried toward the warmth of the station house without a backward glance. Hartley stood there, breath misting in the bitter air, searching for the uncle who had promised to meet her, the uncle who had sent word that he needed help running his general store after his wife passed. But there was no portly gentleman with kind eyes waiting. There was only a lone figure leaning against a post, tall and broad-shouldered, hat pulled low against the wind. He straightened when he saw her, and even through the swirling snow, she could see the way he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who belonged to this harsh land. He walked toward her with measured steps, and when he was close enough that she could see his face, she found herself looking into eyes the color of summer sky, startling against his sun-weathered skin. "You Hartley Nash." His voice was deep, roughened by wind and weather. "I am." She lifted her chin, refusing to show the nervousness that fluttered in her chest. "And you are Jude Keller. I work the Rockingham Ranch about 10 miles west of here." He reached for her bag without asking permission, his manners ingrained despite his rough appearance. "Your Uncle Thomas sent me." "He took a fall yesterday, broke his leg pretty bad. Doc Miller has him laid up at the boarding house." The news hit her like a physical blow. Uncle Thomas was the only family she had left who would speak to her after she had refused to marry the banker's son her mother had chosen. "Is he going to be all right?" "Doc says he will be, but it will be months before he is back on his feet." Jude gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby, 2 sturdy horses stamping impatiently in the cold. "We should get moving. This snow is not going to let up, and I would rather not get caught out in it." She followed him to the wagon, accepting his hand when he offered to help her up. His grip was strong and warm even through their gloves, and she felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. He swung up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to get the horses moving. Behind them, the train whistle sounded again, a mournful note that seemed to mark the closing of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. The town of Lyndon appeared through the curtain of snow like a ghost, buildings huddled together against the wind. It was smaller than she had imagined, just one main street with false-fronted structures on either side. But lights glowed in windows, promising warmth and human companionship, and after 3 days on the train, even this rough frontier town looked welcoming. Jude pulled the wagon to a stop in front of a 2-story building with a sign that read "Miller's Boarding House" swinging in the wind. He helped her down, and this time she was more aware of his hands at her waist, the solid strength of him. She quickly stepped away, flustered by her own reaction. Inside, the warmth enveloped them like an embrace. A woman with graying hair and a practical dress came bustling out from a back room. "You must be Thomas's niece. I am Martha Miller. My husband is upstairs with your uncle now." She took Hartley's coat, clucking over how cold she must be. "Jude, you are staying for supper, I hope." "I should be getting back to the ranch, Mrs. Miller." But even as he said it, he glanced toward the window where the snow was falling so thick that the buildings across the street had disappeared. "Nonsense. You will stay, eat something hot, and if the weather does not clear, you will take one of the rooms here tonight. I will not have you frozen to death trying to get back in this." Martha's tone brooked no argument, and Jude nodded his acceptance with good grace. Hartley was led upstairs to a small room where Uncle Thomas lay propped up on pillows, his legs splinted and elevated. He was thinner than she remembered, his hair more gray, but his smile was genuine when he saw her. "Hartley girl, you made it. I was worried the snow would trap you somewhere along the line." She went to him, taking his hand carefully. "I am here, Uncle Thomas. Do not worry about anything except getting better." "The store," he began, but she shook her head. "Will be fine. I can manage it. You taught me sums and reading when I was a girl, remember? I am not afraid of hard work." His eyes misted. "You sound like your mother before she went east and got those fancy ideas." They talked for a while, and he explained that Jude had been kind enough to check in on him, that the young cowboy was one of the good ones in a town that had its share of rough characters. When Dr. Miller came in to check on his patient, Hartley excused herself and went back downstairs. Jude was sitting at the long dining table, his hat on the chair beside him, dark hair slightly mussed from where the hat had pressed it down. He stood when she entered, another display of manners that surprised her. She had expected frontier men to be crude, but he carried himself with a natural courtesy that spoke of good upbringing. "Your uncle seems in decent spirits," he said as she took a seat across from him. "He does. Thank you for coming to meet me today. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been there. It was no trouble. Thomas is a good man. When word came that he had been hurt, a lot of folks wanted to help." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "This country can be hard on people, especially those new to it. But it can also bring out the best in folks. Neighbors matter out here." Martha brought out steaming plates of beef stew and fresh bread, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Hartley found herself stealing glances at Jude, noting the way his hands moved, the quiet competence in everything he did. He was younger than she had first thought, probably not more than 26 or 27 to her 22 years. "How long have you been in Kansas?" she asked, wanting to break the silence that had stretched too long. "All my life. My parents homesteaded north of here back in '68 when this was still wild country. They built the ranch from nothing, raised cattle and horses, and my brother and I grew up learning the land." His expression softened with memory. "They passed 5 years ago, fever that swept through one winter. My brother took over the main house and I work as the foreman now." "I am sorry about your parents," he shrugged, but she could see the old grief in his eyes. "Life out here teaches you that nothing is permanent. You learn to hold on to what matters and let go of what you cannot change. Is that why you are still here? Because it matters? This land gets in your blood. I have been to Denver, Kansas City, even Chicago once, but I always come back. There is something about being able to see for miles in every direction, about knowing you are making something with your own hands." He looked at her directly and she felt the intensity of his gaze. "I suppose that sounds foolish to someone from Boston." "No," she said softly. "It sounds honest." The storm raged through the night, and true to Martha's prediction, Jude took a room at the boarding house. Hartley lay awake in her narrow bed, listening to the wind howl and thinking about the cowboy downstairs, about the life she had left behind and the uncertain future ahead. She had come west to escape one fate, but she had no clear idea of what she was running toward. Only that she needed to be free to choose her own path. Morning brought a world transformed. The snow had stopped, but drifts piled high against buildings, and the street was a pristine expanse of white. Hartley dressed quickly in the warmest clothes she had, a practical wool dress and sturdy boots, and went downstairs to find Jude already up, helping Martha clear a path to the street. "I need to get back to the ranch," he said when he saw her. "But I wanted to make sure you and your uncle were settled first. The store is just down the street, third building on the right. Thomas has living quarters in the back. I checked on it yesterday, made sure the stove was working and there was wood stacked." She was touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Mr. Keller. You have been very kind, Jude," he corrected. "Out here we do not stand much on formality." He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything, the Rocking M is due west. Anyone in town can point you the right direction, and I come into Lyndon most Saturdays for supplies." "I will remember that." He touched the brim of his hat in farewell and headed to where his wagon was hitched. She watched him go, feeling an odd sense of loss as he drove away into the white landscape. The next weeks were a blur of activity. Hartley threw herself into learning the store, taking inventory of the goods, dealing with suppliers, and serving the steady stream of customers who came through. Many were curious about Thomas's niece from back east, and she endured their questions with as much grace as she could muster. Some were kind, others skeptical of whether a city woman could handle frontier life. Uncle Thomas hobbled down on crutches after the first week, insisting on sitting behind the counter and offering advice even though Dr. Miller had ordered him to rest. But Hartley was grateful for his company and his knowledge. He taught her which customers could be trusted to pay their bills later and which needed to settle accounts immediately. He showed her how to measure out flour and sugar, how to test fabric for quality, how to negotiate with the freight drivers who brought goods from the railroad. True to his word, Jude appeared the following Saturday. Hartley was helping Mrs. Chen, one of the few Chinese families in town, select thread when the bell above the door chimed and he walked in. Her heart gave an unexpected leap at the sight of him, and she had to force herself to focus on her customer. When Mrs. Chen left with her purchases, Jude approached the counter. "How are you settling in?" "Better than I expected, actually, though I am discovering I knew nothing about running a general store." She smiled and was rewarded with an answering curve of his lips that transformed his serious face. "You seem to be managing fine. I heard you stood up to Caleb Morrison when he tried to claim his bill was wrong." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He was trying to short us $3. I simply showed him the ledger." Caleb is used to getting his way. He runs the biggest ranch in the county and thinks that makes him king. Jude's tone was carefully neutral, but she sensed tension underneath. Not many people are willing to call him on his behavior. "Well, I am not from around here, so perhaps I do not know any better." He laughed, a genuine sound that made her smile widen. "Maybe that is exactly what this town needs." He bought supplies, basic things like tobacco and coffee and a new pair of work gloves, and they chatted while she wrapped his purchases. It was easy talking to him, easier than it had been with the young men her mother had paraded in front of her back in Boston. There was no pretense with Jude, no careful maneuvering or social posturing. He said what he meant and listened when she spoke. As winter deepened, Saturdays became the highlight of Hartley's week. Jude came to town regularly, always stopping at the store, always finding reasons to linger and talk. Sometimes he brought fresh meat from the ranch, a gift for Thomas, who was still recovering. Other times he simply appeared, stamping snow from his boots and bringing the cold air in with him. One Saturday in December, he arrived with a pine tree tied to his wagon. "Thought you might want this," he said, a bit sheepishly. "For Christmas. Thomas mentioned you used to decorate trees back east." She was so touched she could barely speak. "That is very thoughtful. I can help you set it up if you like." They spent the afternoon in the store's back room where Hartley and her uncle lived, setting up the tree in the corner by the window. She had brought a box of ornaments from Boston, delicate glass balls that had belonged to her grandmother, and she carefully hung them on the branches while Jude steadied the tree. It felt intimate, this shared task, and she found herself acutely aware of his presence, the way he moved, the sound of his breathing. "Why did you really leave Boston?" he asked suddenly, his voice quiet. She paused, a red glass ball cradled in her palm. She had not told anyone the full truth, but something about the moment, about him, made her want to be honest. "My mother wanted me to marry a man I did not love. He was suitable in every way that mattered to her. Wealthy, connected, from the right family, but he was also cruel. I saw how he treated servants, animals, anyone he considered beneath him. When I refused, my mother said I was throwing away my future. We had a terrible fight, and I realized I could not stay there and become what she wanted me to be." Jude was quiet for a moment. "That took courage." "Or foolishness. I am still not sure which." "Courage," he said firmly. "Anyone can follow the easy path. It takes real strength to choose the hard one when you know it is right." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw understanding in his eyes. "You sound like you speak from experience." "My brother wanted me to leave Kansas, go east and make something of myself, as he put it. He thought ranching was a dead end. We did not speak for 2 years after I told him I was staying." He reached up to adjust a branch, his shoulder brushing hers. "We are all right now, but I will never regret my choice. This is where I belong." "I am beginning to understand that feeling," she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with possibility. Then Uncle Thomas called from the storefront, asking for help with a customer, and the moment passed. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was quite ready to name. Christmas came with more snow and bitter cold. The town gathered at the small church for services, voices raised in familiar hymns. Hartley sat with her uncle, but she was intensely aware of Jude several rows back, his voice a pleasant baritone in the chorus. Afterward, families invited them to share meals, and the day passed in a blur of warmth and fellowship that was different from the formal gatherings she had known in Boston. Here, people were genuine, their hospitality born of real friendship rather than social obligation. Jude found her as the gathering at the church hall was breaking up. "I wanted to give you this before I head back to the ranch." He pressed a small package into her hands, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. She had not expected a gift, and her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a pair of leather gloves, beautifully made, clearly not store-bought. "Did you make these?" "My mother taught me leatherwork when I was young. Figured your Eastern gloves were not holding up too well in this weather. They fit perfectly, the leather supple and warm." "Thank you." "I do not know what to say." "Say you will save me a dance at the New Year's social." Her heart skipped. "I did not know there was a social. First Saturday of the new year, every year since Lyndon was founded. The whole town turns out." He smiled, that rare, full smile that made her pulse quicken. "I would like to dance with you if you are willing." "I am willing," she managed, and his smile widened. The days between Christmas and New Year's crawled by. Hartley found herself thinking about Jude constantly, remembering the way his hands had looked crafting those gloves, imagining those same hands holding her as they danced. She tried on her best dress 3 times, a deep blue silk that brought out the color of her eyes, wondering if it was too fancy for a frontier social. Uncle Thomas watched her fuss with amusement. "You know, I was beginning to think my niece had no interest in young men, the way you turned up your nose at every bachelor your mother introduced. But I see now you just had not met the right one." "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, but her blush gave her away. "Jude Keller is a good man. Honest, hard-working kind. You could do a lot worse. We are just friends. Friends do not look at each other the way you two do." Thomas's expression grew serious. "I know you came out here to escape being told who to marry. I am not trying to push you into anything. But do not let fear of repeating the past stop you from seeing what is right in front of you." His words stayed with her, circling in her mind as the new year approached. The social was held in the same church hall where they had celebrated Christmas, but transformed now with decorations and lanterns that cast a warm glow. Music came from a fiddle, a guitar, and a piano, lively tunes that had feet tapping even before the dancing began. Hartley arrived with her uncle, who was moving better on his crutches now but still could not dance. He settled in with the other men too old or infirm to join the reels, content to watch and gossip. She saw Jude the moment she walked in. He was standing with a group of ranch hands, but his eyes found hers across the room, and the way his face lit up made her breath catch. He excused himself immediately and came to her, looking uncomfortably formal in a clean shirt and string tie. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was better than any practiced compliment. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." He laughed, some of his nervousness fading. "I even convinced my hair to lie flat for once." The music shifted to a waltz and he held out his hand. "May I?" She placed her hand in his, and he led her to the dance floor. His hand at her waist was warm and sure, and they moved together as if they had been dancing for years. She had waltzed with dozens of partners in Boston ballrooms, but none of them had made her feel like this, like she was floating, like the music was playing just for them. "I have been thinking about this all week," he admitted, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "So have I." They danced 3 more dances, then stepped outside to cool off in the crisp night air. Stars blazed overhead, so many more than she had ever seen in the city, and her breath misted in the cold. Jude draped his coat over her shoulders without asking, and she pulled it close, surrounded by the scent of him, leather and wood smoke and something uniquely his own. "Hartley, I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I know you have not been here long, and I do not want to rush you or make you uncomfortable. But I cannot keep pretending that I see you as just a friend. From the moment you stepped off that train, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. The way you laugh, the way you stand up for what is right, the way you have thrown yourself into building a life here. You are the bravest person I know, and I am falling in love with you." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Jude, you do not have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know. I understand if you need time if you are not sure. I just could not go another day without being honest about how I feel." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight rasp of stubble against her palm. "I am falling in love with you too. I think I have been since that first day when you were the only one waiting at the station. You have been kind and patient and good, and being with you feels right in a way nothing else ever has." He closed his eyes briefly, as if offering a prayer of thanks, then opened them and looked at her with such tenderness that she felt tears prick her eyes. "May I kiss you, please?" He kissed her gently at first, a soft press of lips that sent warmth flooding through her. Then she leaned into him, and the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more passionate. His arms came around her, holding her close, and she wound her hands into his hair, all thoughts of propriety forgotten in the perfection of the moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly. I want to do this right. I would like that." They stood there in the cold, wrapped in each other's arms, until the music from inside shifted to another waltz, and they went back to dance some more. The winter months that followed were the happiest Hartley had ever known. Jude came to town twice a week now instead of just Saturdays, always finding excuses to stop by the store. Sometimes he brought her little gifts, a smooth stone from the creek or wildflowers he had somehow found blooming in a sheltered spot. Other times he just came to talk, sitting on the stool behind the counter while she worked, telling her stories about the ranch or asking about her day. On Sundays after church, they went for walks despite the cold, exploring the area around Lyndon. He showed her the creek where he had fished as a boy, the hill where he liked to watch the sunset, the old oak tree that had survived prairie fires and storms for longer than anyone could remember. She told him about Boston, about the books she loved and the dreams she had harbored even as her mother tried to mold her into a society wife. "I wanted to travel," she confessed one Sunday as they sat on a fallen log overlooking the snow-covered prairie. "To see the world, experience things outside the narrow confines of my mother's expectations. Coming here was the first step, but I do not want it to be the last." "Where would you go?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "California to see the ocean, Colorado to see the mountains. Maybe even further to places I have only read about in books." She looked at him, suddenly uncertain. "Does that sound silly?" "No, it sounds exciting." He took her gloved hand in his. "I would like to see those places too someday, with you." The simple statement, the assumption of a shared future, made her heart swell. February brought a thaw, the snow melting into mud and the promise of spring. It also brought trouble in the form of Caleb Morrison. The rancher had been circling around the store more often, making comments about how nice it was to have a pretty face in Lyndon, how a woman like Hartley deserved better than running a dusty general store. She had rebuffed him politely at first, then more firmly when he did not take the hint. One Saturday, he arrived at the store drunk and belligerent. Hartley was alone, Uncle Thomas having gone to visit Dr. Miller for a checkup on his healing leg. Morrison leaned across the counter, his breath reeking of whiskey. "You think you are too good for me. You are just a shop girl, nothing special. That cowboy you have been making eyes at cannot give you anything. I could set you up in a real house, give you fine things. I am not interested, Mr. Morrison. Please leave." He grabbed her wrist when she tried to step back. "I am not done talking to you." The door chimed and Jude walked in, taking in the scene in an instant. His expression went cold and hard in a way Hartley had never seen before. "Let her go." Morrison released her wrist but did not back down. "This is none of your business, Keller. When you put your hands on her, you made it my business." Jude crossed the room, putting himself between Hartley and Morrison. "You need to leave, now. You think you can tell me what to do? I own half this county." "I do not care if you own the whole state. You are leaving." For a moment, Hartley thought Morrison might actually swing at Jude. But something in the cowboy's stance, the quiet certainty that he would not back down, made the rancher think better of it. Morrison sneered and pushed past him, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows as he left. Jude turned to Hartley immediately. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I am fine. Just shaken." She was trembling, reaction setting in now that the confrontation was over. He pulled her into his arms and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I am sorry I was not here sooner. You could not have known, and you were here when it mattered." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "Thank you. I do not trust Morrison to let this go. I am going to talk to the sheriff, let him know what happened. And I think maybe your uncle or I should be here with you during store hours for a while." She wanted to protest that she could take care of herself, but the memory of Morrison's hand on her wrist, the threat in his eyes, made her nod. That would probably be wise. The incident with Morrison cast a shadow over the following weeks, but it also solidified something between Hartley and Jude. He was protective without being overbearing, always making sure she felt safe while respecting her independence. And the depth of her feelings for him continued to grow, until she could not imagine her life without him in it. Spring arrived properly in March, the prairie coming alive with wildflowers and new grass. The store stayed busy with ranchers and farmers preparing for the season ahead, and Hartley was grateful for the distraction. Uncle Thomas was walking without crutches now, stronger every day, and he had started talking about expanding the store, adding a section for farm equipment. One evening in early April, Jude asked if she would like to see the ranch. "I know it is not proper for an unmarried woman to visit a man's home, but my brother and his wife will be there. Sarah has been after me for weeks to bring you out. She is desperate for female company that is not her sisters-in-law." Hartley agreed, curious to see where Jude spent his days. They drove out on a Sunday after church, the wagon bouncing over the rutted road, prairie stretching endlessly on all sides. She understood better now what Jude had meant about the land getting in your blood. There was a freedom here, a vast openness that called to something deep inside her. The rocking M was impressive, a sprawling ranch with a large main house, several barns, and corrals full of horses and cattle. Jude's brother Jackson was a harder, more serious version of Jude, his wife Sarah a cheerful blonde with a ready smile. They welcomed Hartley warmly, and Sarah immediately pulled her aside to show her the house and garden, chattering about how wonderful it was to have another educated woman nearby. Over dinner, Jackson studied Hartley with the same direct gaze his brother had. "Jude tells me you are planning to stay in Lyndon permanently." "I am. This is my home now." "What about your family back east? Do you not miss them?" "My uncle is here. As for my mother, we parted on difficult terms." "I doubt she wants to hear from me." Jackson nodded slowly. "Family can be complicated, but you have found a place here, it seems, and my brother is happier than I have seen him in years. That matters." After dinner, Jude showed her around the ranch, introducing her to his favorite horses and explaining the operation. His knowledge and passion were evident in every word, and she could see how much this life meant to him. "Would you be happy here?" he asked as they stood watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Living on a ranch, I mean. It is a hard life, especially for a woman used to city comforts." "I think I could be happy anywhere with the right person," she said carefully. "The question is whether that person wants the same things I want." He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Hartley, I love you. I want to marry you, build a life with you, see all those places you talked about visiting. I know we have not known each other long, only a few months. But I have never been more sure of anything." Her heart felt like it might burst. "I love you too, and yes, I want all of those things." He kissed her then, sweet and tender, sealing the promise between them. When they parted, his eyes were bright with emotion. "I do not have a ring yet. I wanted to be sure you would say yes before I spent money we might need for other things. But I will get you one, I promise. I do not need a ring right now. I just need you." They told Uncle Thomas that evening when Jude brought her back to town. Her uncle's eyes misted as he embraced them both. "I knew the moment I saw you two together. You are good for each other. Your mother might not approve, Hartley, but I think you have chosen well." The engagement brought a new energy to their planning. They decided on a June wedding, giving them time to prepare but not waiting so long that the anticipation became unbearable. Sarah took charge of helping Hartley with her dress, and the women of Lyndon rallied around with offers of help for the reception. But not everyone was happy about the news. Caleb Morrison made his displeasure known by spreading rumors that Hartley was fortune hunting, that she had turned down his honest proposal to snare a younger man. The talk hurt, but Jude told her to ignore it, that everyone who mattered knew the truth. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, Morrison played his final card. He called in a debt that Uncle Thomas had owed him from years before, demanding immediate payment of $500 or foreclosure on the store. Thomas went pale when the lawyer delivered the papers. "I forgot about this loan," he admitted to Hartley and Jude that evening. "It was from when I first opened the store back when Caleb was not such a bitter man. I have been paying it off bit by bit, but with my injury and the lost income, I fell behind. I thought I had more time." $500 was a fortune. Even selling their inventory would not raise that much quickly enough. Hartley felt panic rising but forced it down. "We will figure something out." Jude was quiet, his jaw tight with anger. "This is because of me. He is punishing you for choosing me over him." "Then we do not let him win," Hartley said firmly. "There has to be a solution." They spent the next days exploring every option. Hartley considered writing to her mother for help but knew that would mean admitting defeat, giving her mother leverage to demand she come home. The bank would not extend credit without collateral they did not have. It seemed hopeless. Then Jude came to her with a proposition. "I have savings. Money I have been putting aside for years, planning to buy my own piece of land someday. It is enough to pay off Morrison and have a little left over." "No, I cannot let you give up your dream for us. You are my dream now. The land will still be there. We can build our own ranch eventually together. But I will not let that man take the store from your uncle and ruin your family's livelihood." She wanted to argue, but the determination in his eyes told her it would be useless. "Are you absolutely sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything except that I love you." They paid off Morrison the next day, Jude handing over the cash with barely concealed contempt. The rancher took the money with a sneer. "Guess you found yourself a fool willing to throw away his future for you." "I found a man worth 100 of you," Hartley shot back, "and I will spend every day being grateful for it." Outside, she turned to Jude, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You already have, just by saying you will marry me." He wiped away her tears with gentle fingers. "We are partners now in everything. What is mine is yours, and together we will build something better than either of us could alone." The wedding took place on a perfect June morning, the sky clear and blue, wildflowers blooming across the prairie. The church was packed with townspeople who had come to care about the Eastern girl who had arrived on the last train before the pass closed, and the cowboy who had been waiting for her. Hartley wore a simple white dress that Sarah had helped her sew, her hair crowned with a wreath of flowers. Uncle Thomas walked her down the aisle, his limp barely noticeable now, his pride evident in every step. And at the altar waited Jude, looking handsome and nervous in a new suit, his eyes never leaving her face as she approached. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about the journey they were beginning together. But Hartley barely heard the words. She was lost in Jude's eyes, in the promises they were making to each other, in the certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. "I, Jude Keller, take you, Hartley Nash, to be my wife. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." His voice was steady and sure, and when she repeated her own vows, she meant every word with her whole heart. The kiss that sealed their marriage was witnessed by the entire town, and the cheer that went up rattled the rafters. They walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, hands clasped, smiles so wide their faces hurt. The reception was held in the churchyard, tables laden with food that everyone had contributed. There was music and dancing, toasts and laughter. Even Jackson gave a speech, welcoming Hartley to the family and promising his brother that he would do everything he could to help them succeed. As the sun began to set, Jude pulled Hartley away from the crowd, leading her to the wagon he had decorated with ribbons and flowers. "Ready to start our life together, Mrs. Keller." She loved the sound of her new name. "More than ready." They had rented a small house on the edge of town, 2 rooms and a kitchen, modest but theirs. Jude carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of their new home. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the weight of what they had promised settling over them in the best possible way. "I love you," he said softly. "I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy. You already make me happy just by being you." She reached up and pulled him down for a kiss, deep and full of promise. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other that left them both awed by the depth of their connection. Hartley had been nervous, her mother's dire warnings about marital duties echoing in her mind. But with Jude, it was nothing like she had feared. He was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and the pleasure they found together was a revelation. Afterward, lying in his arms in their small bed, she felt a peace she had never known before. "I am so glad I got on that train," she whispered. "I am glad I was there waiting," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Life settled into a rhythm over the following months. Hartley continued to run the store with her uncle during the week, while Jude worked at the Rockingham. In the evenings, they were together in their little house, cooking dinner, talking about their days, making plans for the future. On Sundays, they often rode out to explore the surrounding country, Hartley becoming a competent horsewoman under Jude's patient instruction. In August, Uncle Thomas announced that he had decided to semi-retire. "My leg is as good as it is going to get, and I am tired of being cooped up indoors all day. I am thinking about selling the store." Hartley's heart sank. The store had become important to her, a place where she felt useful and capable. "Sell it. But where would we work?" Thomas smiled. "I was hoping you and Jude might want to buy it. I would give you favorable terms, let you pay me over time. It would give you a steady income while you save up for that ranch you want." She and Jude discussed it long into the night. Owning the store would tie them to town more than ranch work would, but it would also give them security and independence. In the end, they agreed, and papers were drawn up making them the new owners of Nash General Store. The responsibility was daunting, but they faced it together. Jude proved to have a good head for business, negotiating better prices with suppliers and finding new sources of merchandise. Hartley expanded their inventory to include more items specifically for women, understanding that market better than her uncle had. Together, they made the store more profitable than it had been in years. Their first Christmas as a married couple was magical. They decorated the same tree Jude had brought her the year before, adding new ornaments they had bought together. On Christmas morning, Jude gave her a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate gold ring set with a small diamond. "I know I promised you a ring when I proposed. It has taken me longer than I wanted to save up for it, but I wanted you to have something beautiful to mark our first year together." She slipped it on, tears blurring her vision. "It is perfect. I love it and I love you. I have something to tell you too," she added, suddenly nervous. "I am fairly certain I am pregnant. The baby should come sometime in early summer." His expression went through a series of changes, shock to joy to wonder. "Really? We are going to have a baby, we are." He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. When he set her down, his hands went to her still flat stomach, wonder on his face. "A baby. Our baby." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though the summer heat made the last months uncomfortable. Sarah had already given birth to her first child and gave Hartley endless advice, some helpful and some well-meaning but impractical. The women of Lyndon rallied around again, bringing baby clothes they had sewn and sharing their own experiences. Jude was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worried about Hartley overworking herself. She had to remind him repeatedly that pregnancy was not an illness, that she was perfectly capable of continuing to help run the store. But his concern came from love, and she found it endearing even when it was frustrating. In July, as the heat shimmered over the prairie, Hartley went into labor. Dr. Miller was called, along with Sarah and Martha from the boarding house. Jude paced the storefront while the women attended to his wife, looking so worried that Uncle Thomas finally poured him a whiskey to calm his nerves. The labor was long and difficult, testing Hartley's strength in ways she had not imagined. But every time she felt like she could not go on, she thought of Jude waiting for her, of the life they were bringing into the world, and she found the will to continue. Finally, as the sun was setting, a baby's cry filled the air. Dr. Miller emerged from the bedroom with a smile. "You have a son. Mother and baby are both doing well." Jude nearly knocked over his chair in his haste to get to Hartley. She was pale and exhausted, but her smile lit up the room when she saw him. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and when she pulled back the blanket, Jude saw his son's face for the first time. "He is perfect," Jude breathed, touching one tiny hand with a finger, awed when the baby's fingers curled around it. "What should we name him?" Hartley asked. They had discussed names for months without settling on one. But now, looking at his son's face, Jude knew. "James, after my father. James Thomas, if your uncle does not mind." Thomas, who had come to the doorway, wiped at his eyes. "I would be honored." Little James was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them up at all hours, but neither Hartley nor Jude minded. They took turns walking him when he cried, marveling at his tiny features, counting his fingers and toes over and over. Uncle Thomas helped mind the store when they were too exhausted to function, amused by the chaos the baby had brought to their orderly life. Watching Jude with their son made Hartley fall in love with him all over again. He was gentle and patient, singing lullabies in his rough cowboy voice, changing diapers without complaint, doing whatever needed to be done. This was a side of him she had only glimpsed before, and it made her love him even more deeply. As James grew from infant to baby to toddler, their lives grew richer and fuller. The store continued to prosper, and they were able to start saving again toward their dream of owning their own ranch. Jude still worked part-time at the Rockingham, maintaining his skills and keeping up the family connection, but his heart was increasingly with his own small family. When James was 2, Hartley discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, her body more tired, and she had to reluctantly step back from the store more than she wanted. But Jude hired a young man to help with the heavy work, and together they managed. Their daughter was born on a snowy December day, arriving faster than James had, as if impatient to meet the world. They named her Julia, and she had Hartley's dark hair and Jude's blue eyes. James was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, and their little house rang with the sounds of children. Life was not always easy. There were hard months when money was tight, when illness swept through the town, when the Kansas weather threw everything from tornadoes to blizzards at them. But they faced it all together, their love and commitment never wavering. On their 5th anniversary, Jude surprised Hartley with news. "I found land, 300 acres south of town with a creek and good grazing. The owner is willing to sell for a fair price, and we have enough saved for a down payment." She could hardly believe it. Our own ranch. It will take years to build it up to make it truly profitable. But it is a start, our start." They bought the land and began the slow process of building their dream. Jude and Jackson worked together to build a small house, just 3 rooms to start but with space to expand. They moved in when Julia was 1 and James was 3, leaving the rented house in town with both relief and nostalgia. The ranch became their world. They raised cattle and horses, slowly building their herd. Hartley kept the store going with hired help, using the steady income to support the ranch while it got established. The children grew up running wild across the prairie, learning to ride almost before they could walk, as much a part of the land as the grass and sky. When James was 5 and Julia was 3, Hartley gave birth again, this time to twins. 2 boys, Jacob and Joshua, who were identical and inseparable from the start. The house that had seemed spacious suddenly felt crowded, and Jude added on 2 more rooms that summer, working late into the evenings to give his growing family the space they needed. Life was chaotic and exhausting and more wonderful than Hartley had ever imagined. Some mornings she woke up and could hardly believe this was her life, that she had somehow found this perfect happiness. The girl who had fled Boston to escape a loveless marriage had found a love deeper and truer than she had known existed. The children adored their father, following him around the ranch, trying to help with chores even when they were too small to be much use. Jude was patient with them, teaching them about the land and animals, instilling in them the values of hard work and honesty that he lived by. And they adored their mother too, coming to her with their hurts and questions, finding comfort in her arms. Uncle Thomas remained a part of their lives, visiting the ranch often, spoiling his great-nieces and great-nephews shamelessly. He sold the store when he was 70, finally truly retiring, and moved into a small cottage they built for him on the ranch property. He lived to see James turn 10, Julia 8, and the twins 5, passing peacefully in his sleep one winter night with a smile on his face. His death hit Hartley hard. He had been her anchor when she arrived in Kansas, her family when she had no one else. But Jude held her through her grief, reminding her that Thomas had died happy, surrounded by the family he loved, and that was a blessing many people never received. The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. James grew tall and serious like his Uncle Jackson, already talking about running the ranch someday. Julia was spirited and independent, declaring at age 10 that she wanted to be a doctor like Dr. Miller, shocking and delighting her parents in equal measure. The twins were wild and adventurous, getting into every kind of mischief imaginable but always together, always loyal to each other. When Hartley was 38 and Jude was 43, they decided their family was complete. 4 children, healthy and happy, more than either of them had dared to hope for in those early days. The ranch had grown too, now over 1,000 acres with a substantial herd, and a reputation for quality horses that brought buyers from as far away as Denver. They had traveled too, fulfilling Hartley's old dream of seeing more of the country. They took the family to Colorado one summer, showing the children the mountains that rose like a wall to the west. Another year they went to California, and Hartley stood on the beach watching the ocean waves crash against the shore, Jude's hand in hers, and felt complete. But they always came back to Kansas, to the prairie that had become home, to the land where they had fallen in love, where they had built their life together. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their now much expanded house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Jude took Hartley's hand. "Do you ever regret it? Getting on that train, coming to a place you had never been, taking a chance on a life so different from what you knew?" She leaned against him, comfortable and content. "Not for a single second. Best decision I ever made, even though I was the only one waiting." She smiled at the old joke, one they had shared 100 times over the years. Especially because you were the only one waiting. You were exactly what I needed, even though I did not know it yet. I knew the moment I saw you, he said softly. Standing there in the snow, looking lost and determined at the same time, I knew you were going to change my life. We changed each other's lives. He kissed her then, sweet and familiar after nearly 20 years of marriage but still capable of making her heart flutter. They sat there as the stars began to appear, counting the blessings of their life together. James eventually took over running the ranch, marrying a sweet girl from a neighboring property and giving Hartley and Jude their first grandchildren. Julia did become a doctor, going east to medical school and returning to Lyndon to set up a practice, shocking some of the older residents but quickly proving her skill. The twins started a horse breeding operation that became famous throughout the territory. Hartley and Jude grew old together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming weathered and worn from years of hard work. But they never lost the love that had brought them together, never stopped finding joy in each other's company. They would sit on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the prairie grass wave in the wind, remembering that snowy day when she had arrived on the last train before the pass closed, and he had been there waiting. They told the story often to their grandchildren, who never tired of hearing it. How Grandma had come from Boston on a train, running from a life she did not want. How Grandpa had been sent to meet her and had fallen in love at first sight. How they had built this ranch and this family together, brick by brick, day by day, through hard work and determination and love that never wavered. When they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole county turned out for the party. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, laughter and tears. Their children and grandchildren presented them with a portrait, painted from an old photograph taken on their wedding day, and Hartley cried when she saw it. "We were so young," she marveled, looking at the faces of the people they had been. "We have had a good life," Jude said, his arm around her waist. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "The best life," she agreed. They lived to see their grandchildren grown and starting families of their own, to see the ranch they had built continue to prosper under James's capable management, to see Julia train the first female doctor to work under her. They watched Kansas change and grow, saw the frontier spirit give way to something more settled and civilized, but the essence of the place remained the same. Hartley was 70 when Jude's health began to fail. His heart had given him trouble for years, but he had always pushed through it, refusing to slow down. But finally, even his stubborn will could not overcome the failing of his body. He spent his last days in the bedroom they had shared for 5 decades, surrounded by family, holding Hartley's hand. "I am not afraid," he told her one quiet afternoon when they were alone. "I have lived a full life, loved and been loved. What more could a man ask for? Stay with me a little longer," she pleaded, even though she knew it was selfish. "I will always be with you." He touched her face with a trembling hand. "In every sunset, every spring flower, every moment on this land we built together, I love you, Hartley. I have loved you from the moment I saw you step off that train, and I will love you beyond this life into whatever comes next." He died that night, peacefully in his sleep, his hand still clasped in hers. Hartley held him and wept, feeling as though half of her soul had been torn away. The funeral was huge, hundreds of people coming to pay their respects to a man who had been a cornerstone of the community for over 50 years. But Hartley could not find comfort in the crowds. She mourned alone on the porch they had shared, looking out at the prairie and remembering his smile, his laugh, the way his hands had felt holding hers. Remembering every moment of their life together, treasuring each memory like the precious gift it was. Her children worried about her, but she assured them she was all right. She was not ready to go yet, she told them. She had grandchildren and great-grandchildren to watch grow up, stories to tell about their grandfather, a legacy to protect. She lived 3 more years, remaining active and involved in the ranch and the family. But everyone could see that part of her was just waiting, ready to join the man she had loved for so long. On a spring morning, with wildflowers blooming across the prairie and the sky the exact shade of blue Jude's eyes had been, she passed away in her sleep, a peaceful smile on her face. They buried her next to him on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the old oak tree they had loved. The marker read, Hartley Keller, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She arrived on the last train before the snow closed the pass and found love waiting. And below it, Jude's marker, which read Jude Keller, beloved husband, father, grandfather. He was the only one waiting and found everything he had been looking for. Their love story became legend in Lyndon, told and retold to new generations. The ranch they had built continued to thrive under their descendants' care. And every winter, when the first snow fell and closed the mountain passes, people in Lyndon would remember the story of the Eastern girl and the cowboy who had been waiting, and believe a little more in the power of love to transform lives. The house they had built and expanded over the years remained in the family, each generation adding their own touches but preserving the core of what Hartley and Jude had created. The porch where they had sat countless evenings was kept exactly as it had been, 2 rocking chairs positioned to watch the sunset, a memorial to the love that had started it all. James's son, named Jude after his grandfather, took over the ranch when James retired. He told his children about the great-grandmother who had come from Boston and the great-grandfather who had loved her so completely. He showed them the old photograph from the wedding, pointed out the land they had bought with every penny they had saved, taught them the values of hard work and integrity that had been passed down. Julia's daughter became a doctor too, carrying on the tradition of strong women in the family. She kept the leather gloves that Jude had made for Hartley all those years ago, the ones he had given her for Christmas that first year, preserved in a special box and brought out sometimes to show patients who needed to hear a story about love conquering all. The twins' descendants ran the horse breeding operation, now known throughout the country for producing the finest stock west of the Mississippi. They told buyers about how it had all started with 2 wild boys and their father's patient teaching, how generations of knowledge had built something lasting and worthwhile. Every year on June 15th, the anniversary of Hartley and Jude's wedding, the whole extended family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. It started small, just their children and grandchildren, but grew over the years until it included cousins and second cousins and family friends who had been adopted into the fold. They would feast and dance and tell stories late into the night, keeping the memory alive. The oldest members of each generation were tasked with telling the story, the whole story, to the youngest children. How Hartley had fled an arranged marriage in Boston, seeking freedom and a chance to choose her own path. How she had arrived in Lyndon on the last train before winter closed the mountain pass, stepping into an unknown future with nothing but courage and determination. How Jude had been there waiting, sent to meet her, but staying because his heart recognized its match. How they had fallen in love despite opposition, had overcome obstacles through partnership and faith, had built a life and a legacy that endured. The children would listen with wide eyes, asking questions, wanting to know every detail. And the elders would smile and remember, passing on not just a story but a legacy of love and perseverance that defined their family. In Lyndon itself, the general store was long gone, replaced by more modern establishments. but a historical marker stood where it had been, telling the story of Thomas Nash and his niece who had helped build the town's economy. And across the street, a small museum housed artifacts from the early days, including a photograph of Hartley and Jude standing in front of the store, young and hopeful and so obviously in love that it made visitors smile. The church where they had married was still standing, carefully preserved by the Historical Society. Couples came from all over to be married there, wanting to capture some of the magic of Hartley and Jude's legendary romance. The minister would tell their story as part of every ceremony, using it as an example of what marriage could be when built on genuine love and mutual respect. The train station where Hartley had first arrived was now a museum piece, the tracks long since removed, but a replica of the platform had been built and was a popular spot for proposals. Young men would bring their sweethearts there, tell them the story of the cowboy who had been waiting, and ask them to start their own love story. And in the winter, when the snow fell heavy and closed the mountain passes just as it had that long ago November, old-timers in Lyndon would gather in the warmth of their homes and remember. Remember a time when the frontier was still being settled, when love stories could begin with a chance meeting on a train platform, when commitment and hard work could build empires from nothing. The legacy of Hartley and Jude Keller was not just in the land they had claimed, or the children they had raised, or the business they had built. It was in the example they had set, the proof that love could be strong enough to overcome any obstacle, that partnership between equals could achieve more than either could alone, that a life built on genuine affection and mutual respect was worth more than all the wealth in the world. Their great-great-grandchildren walked the same land they had walked, tended the same soil, watched the same prairie sunsets. And they understood, in a way that went deeper than words, what a gift they had been given. Not just the physical inheritance of land and property, but the spiritual inheritance of knowing what true love looked like, how it endured, how it transformed not just two people but generations. And so the story lived on, told and retold, adapted and embellished but never losing its essential truth. She had arrived on the last train before the snow closed the pass. He had been the only one waiting. And from that moment, two lives had intertwined into one story of love that would echo through the generations, a testament to the power of choosing courage over comfort, love over duty, and partnership over loneliness. In the end, that was the real legacy. Not the acres or the cattle or the buildings, but the understanding that love, real love, was worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth building a life around. And that such love, once found, could create ripples that spread far beyond the two people who shared it, touching lives and shaping futures in ways they could never have imagined when they first looked into each other's eyes on a snowy platform in Kansas and knew, without question, that they had found exactly what they had been searching for all along.